Chapter 3, Good News and Horrible News. The next morning, Mother meets me for a prayer in the stable. After a tender embrace, I climb into the carriage, ready to face the trading station. Penny murmurs, Mistress Bowling, I ain't seen Leroy today. He been gone from the cabin since I woke up. Mother clears her throat and frowns. I stiffen up, dreading her response. Penny, I know he's your brother, but I just cannot have him in my home anymore. The color drains from Penny's face. You see, yesterday my silver bracelet went missing. She speaks slowly as if to calm herself. I've had it since it was handed down to me when I was a girl. It belonged to my grandmother, Pocahontas, whom I never met. It's especially precious because her father, Chief Powhatan, gave it to her. Of course, Leroy claims he had nothing to do with it, just like my brooch. A brooch is like a hair clip. Mother scoffs and shakes her head. But once again, he was the only other person in my bedroom. Alas, my mind is made up. She sighs, and her tone roughens. From now on, he shall work out in the fields. I don't have any other choice. Penny's mouth hangs open. After a lengthy pause, she mutters, Yes, ma'am. And with that, she and I set off in uneasy silence for the duration of our ride. When we enter the trading station, I cast a nervous glance over the restless crowd. Spotting the scroll hanging on the shingled wall, I take in a ragged breath. There it is. The newest casualty list. As usual, it appears innocuous. I don't dare underestimate its power to decide life or death. I'm fully aware it can shatter my world in a single glance. Gripping Penny's elbow, I press myself into the crowd. Spotting my cousin Betty, I move in next to her despite my mixed feelings. But no matter how far I crane my neck, I can't catch a glimpse. As usual, the men in front block the view with their high, broad shoulders. I should be accustomed to this after so many years, but I can't help letting out a huff of indignation. My heart pounds at full force, and a wave of determination washes over me. I can't wait a minute longer. I must see it now, despite the hordes of people in front of me. Perched on my toes, I grab Betsy's shoulder with one hand and Penny's with the other. I thrust myself upward, but unfortunately, the higher vantage point offers me no real improvement. It's just as well, since Betsy shakes me off with a toss of her flaxen tresses. I smirk. If nothing else, I've succeeded in irritating her. She purses her lips and glares at me. Settle yourself, cousin. You look like a ninny with your ridiculous contortions. Remember, you're a bowling, and so you'd best behave like one, not a silly tomboy. She lowers her voice into a snake-like hiss. Such impertinence of becoming a lady of our station. We shall find out soon enough. I want to ignore her, but her chiding just agitates me all the more. Gritting my teeth, I clench my apron and whisper to Penny, Why does Mother assume we're friends? We're cousins and cousins only. Why, she can't get that through her head. I've always been more comfortable with boys anyway. That's except for Penny and my two sisters, who are up in heaven with Father. Within seconds, my frustration gets the better of me. I fume aloud in a rowdy voice, daring it to carry. Confound it! This is all so unfair! If Father were still alive, they'd no doubt have cleared the way for him. He was among the first in Virginia's General Assembly to speak out against King George, long before the Boston Tea Party. Even though he's been gone a whole decade now, my heart still aches for him. I still miss his massive bear hugs and him hoisting me up in the air, marveling at how I've grown taller than him. I often comfort myself by imagining him bracing me through the lofty walls of Bolingbroke that he built with such devotion. I all but bellow, Don't I have just as much right as the men to find out if my brothers are dead? Aren't we all part of the same cause? The disapproving looks from the crowd don't bother me a bit. Acting like a lady isn't getting me any closer, just as it prevents me from contributing to this awful war. If I were a boy, everything would be different. I could risk my life on the battlefield too. I'd no longer be a spectator, relegated to the back of the crowd. With its typical stealth, though, self-doubt creeps into the cobwebs of my mind. Do I really have courage? If the redcoats actually shot at me, would I return fire? Or would I drop my musket and run away squealing? I sigh. There's no way to know until it happens, but my misgivings make it seem all the more likely. Penny nods her head. Let's just give it a minute and we'll get you up there. You'll see. Betsy shakes her curly blonde ringlets with exaggerated sniff. So you're not the only one wanting to see the list, cousin. You'll have to wait just like the rest of us. Well, except for me. The corners of her mouth turn into a simpering smile, and I want to box her ears. You're too young to understand this, but I'm 18 and on the verge of becoming an old maid, so I'm in no hurry to find out how many more boys won't return home to court me. Although I try to block out her blather, I roll my eyes. Oblivious to my reaction, she flashes her signature coy smile. After all, there's only one boy who really matters to me. I'm so relieved that he wasn't near Guilford Courthouse or even in North Carolina at all. Of course, I don't need to ask about the boy's identity. Her pining for Peter Francisco has been no secret since the last fall's spinning bee. In fact, she rarely talks about anything else, which I find revolting. With a smirk, I set out to deflate her. Oh yes, he was there. He most certainly was. I keep my tone light, confident my nonchalance will provoke her all the more. And he was injured quite badly, in fact. I shake my head. What a pity. Betsy glowers at me with flaring nostrils. And how would you know of all people? After all, you barely ever leave Bolingbroke. She curls her upper lip. I happen to know he's home right now, between enlistments. I toss my braid over my shoulder and shrug. Ignoring her snippiness, I do my best to irritate her further. Stith told me, in a letter, of course. Oh, it's also been in this week's newsletter, too. Really? Betsy's baby blue eyes widen. So you knew this and you didn't bother to tell me? I shoot her a withering look. Well, since you barely met him, I didn't find the matter pressing. Of course, I should have refrained from using such tart words, but a warm, gloating feeling fills me as Betsy makes little puffing sounds. At least a good row would spare me of her pestering for a bit. It's impossible to underestimate that value. Up ahead, there's a chilling juxtaposition. The men who don't see familiar names on the list shout with glee, while the unfortunate others break into heavy sobs. The waiting crowd stands hushed and frozen with dread. It is a deathly quiet that speaks volumes, louder than dozens of cymbals smashed together. As many times as I've experienced this somber ritual, it never fails to shake me to the core. Alas, there's nothing to do but wait. But I have no such patience. Under my breath, I whisper, "Dear God, please spare him one more time, and Alexander too." Mother's dear friend, Mistress Blandford, makes her way through the packed crowd and greets me with an affectionate smile. "Beautiful Susanna, I was hoping to see you here today. With those hazel eyes and ginger hair, you look more like your father every day. And what a handsome fellow he was. In this dim light, they look green as emeralds. Your eyes do." She pats my arm, one of her many endearing traits. "As your mother told you, whenever my Joseph gets a letter through, he never fails to mention how well he's getting on with Stith." She chuckles. "Lately, he's been asking about you, too, often before the rest of us." I look away lest she see the scorn in my eyes. Mother reminds me of Joseph's newfound interest at every opportunity, but I can't muster any enthusiasm, not until my brothers have returned home unscathed. I know my heart should flutter at his interest, but I'm skeptical. After all, I've scarcely seen him in years. His freckled face, mischievous grin, and unruly red hair are blurry in my mind. Of course, he's been Stith's best friend since boyhood, but I'm still the little sister who pestered them. He's 16 now, you see. I imagine he'll be looking to marry once he's back home. Her eyes sparkle. The two of you would have such beautiful children. No doubt they'd be ginger-haired as well. Her cheeks turn into rosy pink as she beams. Once Stith, Joseph, and I played a naughty prank on our tutor, hiding down in the tuttle for an entire lesson. Even though I was a tomboy, they only included me because I threatened to tattle. I blink, reliving the sting of Mother's whip afterwards. Nonetheless, I had no desire to sit with the ladies doing needlework or stitching a sampler. As much as I hate to admit it, it's no wonder Betsy developed into an excellent seamstress, while my stitches are still a hazard mess. Joseph spent so much time with us at Bolingbroke that Mother called him her third son. He paid me little mind as I tagged along, only mocking me as I snuck into Stith's trousers and had to yank them up after every step. He did teach me to paddle, though. How I basked in his attention. Thanks to him, I finally learned to keep my canoe on a straight path. But the world was a different place back then. The only thing that matters to me now is breaking through this crowd. Given Betsy's constant whining about her impending old maid status, I should feel nothing but gratitude. Having a suitor these days is nothing short of a miracle with such a lack of eligible young men. After years of war, the widows and old maids outnumber the matrons by far. Once back home, Joseph could have picked of many young ladies desperate for betrothal and widows as well. Mistress Blandford waves her hand. This will all be over soon, I'm sure of it. I avert my eyes and hold back a grimace. If only it were so simple. You can't just wish war away like you're blowing out a lantern. Should it end soon, that would mean victory for the Redcoats. After all, they're on the verge of crushing us. My mind races ahead, already tormented by King George's certain vengeance on the ruffians who dared to defy him, including Stith. Perhaps Mistress Blandford is just mad. For the life of me, I can't fathom her unflappable confidence. How does she know that Joseph will return home in one piece? After all, she lost her older son early on. Maybe she thinks fate couldn't be so cruel as to take her remaining son. I want to shake her by the shoulders and scold her. Madam, if you haven't noticed, unspeakable horrors take place every day and have been for years on end. Many a family has lost multiple members. Just look at Mistress Higgins, who lost it all, her husband and both sons. She's bitter beyond recognition with a scowl all but tattooed on her face. Then again, I'm the one who is daft. After all, I can't stop worrying about Stith and Alexander. I'm so plagued with nightmares and I'm afraid to drift off to sleep. So many questions gnaw at me, but I'm afraid of the answers. Where are they? How are they? Are they hungry? Do they have clothes? Do they have shoes? Are they injured? Are they dying? And then there's the worst question of all. Are they already dead? There's no way to guarantee they'll make it home alive and intact. My inability to help them and our cause rackles me to no end. I want to make my mark on the war. Alas, I cannot. Perhaps that saves me from discovering that I'm anything but brave. Given the dismal circumstances, I'm resigned to worry as a constant part of daily life. Why, isn't it Mistress Blandford aware that our cause is so very desperate right now? General Cornwallis is ready to snuff it out at once and for all. His mighty British Southern Army has swept north of Savannah, leaving nothing but destruction in its path. Ignoring the truth doesn't change it any. It just makes it more painful to accept later on. Doesn't the thought of hand-to-hand fighting at Gulliford Courthouse take her breath away too? Many of our soldiers fought buck naked with hardly a shred of clothing on their backs. Goodness me, some just wore their flint boxes only big enough to cover their private parts. There weren't even enough muskets to go around. They had to wait for a fellow soldier to die. The thought of receiving a fallen patriot's weapon, still warm and slippery with crimson ooze, makes me squirm. The old man stands frozen up in front of the list. Suddenly, his burly shoulders melt. With seconds, his entire upper body crumples inward. "Dear God," he wails, as if he's alone in this cavernous room. "Not Henry. Dear God, no, not this. He's only 17. As if by instinct, the men surrounding him back up a step. They are feigning politeness, but I wonder if they're also afraid his loss is as contagious as the pox. Finally, a good Samaritan helps the old man shuffle to the side as his body erupts in heavy sobs. Spotting some open space, I scoop up my petticoat and charge ahead, warming my slender frame through the pack. Betsy calls after me in a shrill-laced voice with anger. "Susanna Bowling, you simply cannot do that. You must wait like a young lady, or I shall have no choice but to tell my Aunt Susanna." I hiss a retort over my shoulder. "Tattle all you want, cousin. I don't give a fig. Even Benjamin Franklin says God will help those who help themselves. No one, especially her, will stop me from wedging myself into that gap before it disappears." I twist and push my way toward the front. When I pass Mistress Higgins, she glowers at me and with narrowed eyes and launches into a scolding. "Why, aren't you an awfully cheeky thing? I don't suppose your mother is here to witness such a fine display of your uppity bowling manners." I'm on page 26 now. I ignore her. We may be the same side of this war, but she's no kindred spirit. Mother makes a habit of defending her, claiming the poor woman hasn't been so sour, but that the combination of her heartbreaking losses and then having to sell her slaves to pay for the funerals ruined her. Why is she even here? After all, she has no one left at stake. I can't help but assume the worst. Witnessing the pain of others softens her own. Finally, the list hangs right in front of me. Huzzah! I reach out with my trembling index fingers and touch it. My knees quiver. A wave of nausea washes over me. I try to breathe in the musty air, but my chest is too constricted for more than a shallow inhale. Now, faced with the truth, I'm too terrified to confront it. My thoughts run hither and thither like a spooked horse. Perhaps I shouldn't look at the list after all. Then my brothers can't be dead, not to me, not yet anyway. If I do actually read their names up there, they'll be gone from that moment on, gone forevermore. Breaking into a sweat, I resist the urge to retreat. It's time. I must know the truth no matter what. Plus, Mother is agonizing at home, waiting for my report. Although my real focus is on Stith, if Alexander died, part of me would also die too. I've seen it happen. When we lost Father, a bit of Mother perished along with him. All at once, she lost her husband, dearest friend, and cousin. And the same went for Sally, as well as my older sister Mary and her unborn baby. I gloss over the lengthy list of A's and scan the B's from the top. The further I look down, the more my hands shake. I run down through the names, bracing myself for the worst. Bennigan Caleb, Benton Philip, Blandford Joseph, Bolton Andrew, Brady Samuel. I read the B several times over and stare, trying to take it all in, but I don't see anything. Do I trust my eyes? Finally, I'm sure there are no Bowlings on the list. Yes, praise God, we're safe once again. My brothers are out of harm's way, for now anyway, and my extended bowling kin as well. I let out a huge sigh of relief. As heartfelt as every other during this hateful war. Mother and I have survived, at least until the next list arrives. I want to shout, stamp my heels on the creaky wooden floor, and break into a jig. However, this is no time to gloat, not when my neighbors are receiving the most devastating news of their lives. With flushed cheeks, I turn on my heel to make my way out, delighted to relinquish my coveted spot. Despite my elation, though, something doesn't feel quite right, but I can't pinpoint why. Then again, everything feels amiss these days. After a moment of hesitation, I whirl back around and scan through the bees again. I have no explanation for my compulsion. After all, I'm already certain my brothers aren't on there. Halfway through, I gasp and clap my hand over my mouth. Blandford Joseph. There it is, clear as could be. My euphoria disappears in an instant. Instead, my heart aches for the unsuspecting Mistress Blandford, waiting patiently somewhere in the crowd behind me. This news will shatter her bizarre confidence with the force of a dozen cannonballs and tear her heart into bleeding pieces. For her, the worst has happened. Her second son is gone forever, as is Stith's dearest friend and fellow cavalryman. Keeping my moist eyes cast down, I work my way back through the crowd, my long braids swinging behind me like a pendulum. Despite my internal numbness, I feel someone's hand touch my shoulder. Caught off guard, I scan the people packed around me, leery of everyone. I brace myself for another rebuke from Mistress Higgins. I may be guilty, but I'm not a speck remorseful. But to my dismay, it's far worse than Mistress Higgins' scowl. I'm face to face with Mistress Blandford again. Her eyes are now cloudy and full of tumult as they bore into my skull. My dear girl, what of your brothers? Are they safe? Her wrinkled mouth folds into an apologetic smile. I'm frozen at first. I manage to nod as if all is well, but it's not, absolutely not. Yes, ma'am, for now they are, praise God. I look past her, squirming in my worn boots. For the life of me, I can't bear to witness the raw fear running rampant in her eyes. Mistress Blandford lets out a hoarse whisper. Bless your heart, my dear. Her eyes now dart across my drawn face, searching for clues. Did you see him? Did you see my boy on there? I can't bear to tell her that her son is dead. It's too much of a blow to deliver right here, right now. Pretending to reflect for a moment, I struggle for words. How I wish I could say, no, ma'am, most definitely not, he isn't on there. But no, that would be a blatant lie and cruel beyond all measure. Joseph isn't coming home, not ever. Her dear boy will never marry me or anyone else. She can no longer dream of becoming a doting grandmother until her young daughter grows up. Oh, the sadness of it all is too overwhelming for me to handle right now. Mistress Blandford's eyes beseech me, now wild with unadulterated terror. Panic has ripped off the mask covering her true emotions, revealing a portal into her frightened soul. Susanna, please spare me the torture of going up there. It feels like the executioner's block, only worse. After all, it's my son's neck at stake instead of my own. She lets out a heavy sigh and hangs her head. Every time I wonder if our luck has run out again. There's no warning when the Grim Reaper will pay us another visit. Placing a hand on her chest, she softens her face. Please tell me. Please, for Joseph. She lingers his name, savoring the sound. Looking down at the brass buckles on my boots, I falter. Excuse me, ma'am. I fumble my apron strings, stalling as I wrestle with my conscience. In haste to look for my brother's names, I neglected to look for Joseph. My neck grows hot. I'm sure it's splotchy red. My sincerest apologies. I blush, well aware my words are far from genuine. I probably look like a sunburned tomato. A look of crazed bewilderment sweeps across Mistress Blandford's face and then disappears as she regains her composure. We all have many a burden on our shoulders these days, don't we? I shall find out soon enough. Tears bubble over, nonetheless, trickling down her ashen face. She swats them away at the back of her hand. Please forgive my weeping. I pray we've thwarted the angel of death again, too. She reaches out and squeezes my hand, caressing it with her thumb. We must stay united behind our cause if we're to have any hope at all. A surge of shame washes over me. It wasn't right to lie to her. I know it full well, but I just couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Misty-eyed, I nod. Patting my shoulder, Mistress Blandford forces a tight-lipped smile. Well, we're all looking forward to the spring spinning bee. It's so wonderful of your mother to organize these year after year. We surely need a happy occasion, don't we? Somehow I muster a wan smile in return. Her brave attempt at keeping herself in good spirits is hard to handle. Inwardly, I cringe for what she will soon endure. With a light sweat on my brow, I finally emerge from the crowd, relieved to have space around me. Scanning the slaves lining the back wall, I make a beeline for Penny's petite silhouette. Thankfully, I dodge past Betsy, huddled with some other nin-witted girls, no doubt gossiping about Peter Francisco and my uncouth behavior. I smirk. Well, at least I've provided good fodder for discussion. An expectant look crosses Penny's dark brown face. What's the news, Miss Suki? I flash a closed-mouthed smile. They're all right, thank God. Then I lean into her and grab her arm. But hurry, let's go as fast as we can so we don't have to see her. Penny shuffles forward with a puzzled look, but I'm already racing to the door. That is the last part of chapter 3, and I'm pausing on page 30.